News 8's Commitment 2018 election coverage of the race for governor. Live from WGAL. Tonight, hear from the 3 Republican candidates who are running to face incumbent Democrat Tom Wolf in the fall.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Janelle Stelson.
And I'm Mike Straub. We welcome you to this WGAL Commitment 2018 debate in the race for governor. Our goal here tonight, find out where the Republican candidates stand on the issues and to make you a more informed voter.
Well, tonight we have all 3 candidates running for the Republican nomination for Pennsylvania governor. First, we want to introduce you to these candidates.
Laura Ellsworth has lived in Pittsburgh for nearly 4 decades. She attended Princeton University and the University of Pittsburgh. She's a partner in an international law firm in Pittsburgh. Ellsworth is married and has 1 son.
Paul Mango graduated from West Point, served as a U.S. Army Ranger, and attended Harvard. He worked for nearly 3 decades in a global management consulting firm. Mango is married and has 5 daughters.
Scott Wagner grew up in York County. He started his first small business at age 20 and is president and owner of Penn Waste Incorporated and KBS Trucking. He was first elected to the state Senate in 2014. Wagner is married and has 4 children.
Well, here's our format for tonight. Prior to tonight's debate, the candidates drew for studio positions and question order. The first candidate will get 1.5 minutes to answer each question.
Then the other candidates will get 1 minute to respond. We will also allow time for rebuttals if we need to. Then the candidates will make closing statements. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, here we go.
Let's jump right into this. Our first question is for Ms. Ellsworth. Pennsylvania is among the nation's leader in some harrowing gun statistics. Intimate partners killed with guns, law enforcement killed with guns, and homicides by gun, especially among minority populations. As governor, what would you do to reduce gun deaths in Pennsylvania?
Well, we start with the 2 Second Amendments that we have in Pennsylvania. We have a federal Second Amendment and we have a state Second Amendment that is also broader. As somebody who was raised around guns, I got my first shotgun when I was 15 years old. I used to shoot trap in the basement with my dad when I was a kid after dinner. So I know that you can be raised with guns. I know that guns can be safe and can be a part of our world. The idea is to keep those guns out of the hands of people who would misuse them. So some of the things I would do to achieve that is I would have more universal background checks. I would make sure that some of the mental health and other adjudicated mental health and criminal activity that is currently an impediment under current law for access to a gun is something that was more appropriately enforced. And I would also make sure that we keep the guns out of the hands of people who have prior felony records and other kinds of disqualifying characteristics. I also think it is important that we have reporting, more centralized reporting of incidences of people who would misuse a gun, that call a number, that those be referred immediately to schools and immediately to the people whose names may be associated with those reports. Those are some things that I think would reduce gun violence.
The next name in our draw was Mr. Mango. So Mr. Mango, 60 seconds on how you would reduce gun deaths in Pennsylvania.
The Constitution of the state says the right to bear arms in defense of yourself or of the state shall not be questioned, and I will defend the rights of law-abiding citizens to bear those arms. I also spent a lot of time in my life bearing arms. I learned as a child. I carried one for a long time in the military. I made sure all 5 of my daughters know how to handle weapons. But the most important thing we can do is enforce the laws that are on the book today. I would not introduce new laws. I would not introduce any new restrictions, as Laura just suggested. We need to enforce the laws that are on the books today. Certainly we need to add resources to screen, diagnose, and treat mental illness and ensure folks who suffer from those illnesses don't have access to these deadly weapons. And I also would not suggest we raise the age, as Senator Wagner has said, from 18 to 21 for young people to handle weapons. When I was 18, I had no problem handling a weapon. I was well trained in it. We need to make sure our kids are well trained. It's part of our heritage. We have the day after Thanksgiving off so that we can go out and hunt. I would encourage that. We need to enforce the laws we have on the books today.
Senator Wagner, ways to reduce gun deaths?
Well, number one, we have background checks in place. We need to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. And listen, leaders have discussions. Mr. Mango is now talking about that I'm in favor of raising age limits, and that's not true. Leaders have discussions. If we want to have closed door discussions, well, then that's what happens. But I don't believe that is serving the citizens of Pennsylvania. Listen, we have a lot of mental health issues. But listen, the Parkland shooting in Florida, the FBI was called repeatedly and they didn't do their job. And agencies need to have the manpower. There needs to be accountability when someone becomes aware of a situation and they report that situation. There needs to be a response. But at the end of the day, you know, really, we're talking 2 to 3% of the people that shouldn't have guns. And why should that impact the other 98%? But it's time we have a discussion and we get it out on the table instead of this closed door stuff. But I want to be clear, I'm not, you know, in favor of raising an age limit.
Thank you very much.
May I respond to that?
You both look like you wanted to.
Well,
quickly, please.
I'm just telling you, all three of us were with Ken Matthews on a gubernatorial forum just a couple weeks ago.
And
in the
explain
Senate.
who that is.
He is a radio personality in central Pennsylvania, and the senator said he would consider raising the age for handling certain rifles from age 18 to 21. Let's have the discussion. Those were his words, not mine. If you want to add to that, Senator, please do, but that's what I heard you say.
If I could also respond to it, I think one of the other things we need to look at, your question was specifically how do we keep gun violence down? And one of the things we understand is that a lot of this gun violence occurs in our inner cities, and I think that involves workforce programs for our kids. I think it improves education, as I'm sure we'll talk about. And one of the things I think is important for people to think about is that if you have a kid, you're better off if you put a diploma in their hand or a paycheck in their hand than a gun in their hand. And so some of the other issues I think we're going to talk about also impact your question.
Thank you. Let's move on to some of those topics now.
I just wanted to quickly ask a follow-up with Senator Wagner. So is it 21 or 18 for you to raise the limits or not?
No, the ages are there. But listen, there's a discussion. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you think, should somebody at 18 have the ability to get a shoulder-fired rocket missile? I mean, it's a discussion we're going to have. Let's have a discussion. And that's something we don't have in Harrisburg. And you know, this attacking someone when we're open and we want to talk about the issues. Listen, the people of Pennsylvania deserve better than this back and forth stuff. They want to talk about the issues, and there are a lot of issues in Pennsylvania. So let's move on and talk about the other issues.
Okay, so you would not raise the limit for somebody to buy a gun right now?
No.
Okay, thank you. Paul Mango, you drew second. Let's start the next question with you. We want to talk about spending. All of you want to get rid of or cut property taxes, but every plan state lawmakers have considered in recent years would create massive funding cuts for schools. So, how are you going to cut property taxes and fund schools, Mr. Mango?
Well, first of all, there is a bill before the Senate, or it's been in the Senate for 3 or 4 years. It's called Senate Bill 76. I read all 138 pages. I spoke to the author of the bill. I spoke to many of the citizens who had input into the bill. And it suggests that we eliminate school property taxes, and in place of that, it has some sales tax and some income tax. And it has a very important feature in it, and that feature is that if the local school district wants to increase spending beyond a certain kind of inflationary limit, beyond that, they have to go to the people. They have to go to the people and ask them in a referendum for the vote. So some have said, oh my gosh, this will take power and move it out of the school district and to Harrisburg. I say, no, it's the opposite. It's going to move power out of the school district and give it back to the people. But let me tell you one thing I won't do. The reason we want to alleviate property taxes is because seniors are getting crushed. There's close to 10,000 Pennsylvanians a year that are being evicted from their homes. Most of them, many of them, are seniors on fixed income. Again, I'm not attacking, I'm talking about the issues. The senator has said he would like to increase taxes on seniors' pensions. I do not. I want to make sure our seniors are taken care of. They're already getting crushed by Medicare payments. They're getting crushed by property taxes. I will not increase the taxes. I would not impose any taxes on any seniors' pensions.
All right, Senator Wagner, property taxes versus funding schools.
My goal as governor will be to eliminate school taxes on real estate. And I'm a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 76. But we have a bigger problem in Harrisburg. We have not balanced our checkbook in 30 years. We don't know how much money we have or how much money we don't have. How do I know? I've been in the Senate for 4 years. I serve on the Senate Appropriations Committee. I mean, it's a total circus when we go through the budget hearings each year. I've spent 60 to 80 hours a week on appropriations, 60 to 80 hours a year on appropriations hearings. We need to balance our checkbook before we move on to all the provisions in Senate Bill 76. And then we will move forward. But at the end of the day, and I also want to respond, I made a comment a year and a half ago at an event in Reading. Listen, there are 2 top pension recipients in the state of Pennsylvania. Former Penn State administrators, $477,000, $455,000. Listen, there's a swim coach that just retired at Westchester, gets $182,000. They don't pay any income tax. I talked about maybe a threshold, maybe over $100,000, something like it. Again, it's a discussion.
Okay, thank you. Laura Ellsworth.
The property tax proposals on the table are not eliminate property taxes. It is replace property taxes with market-based taxes, either income taxes or sales taxes. I believe that we need to give more alternatives to local taxing districts, but I think it's important that we not eliminate property taxes altogether, because when you have market-based taxes like income tax or sales tax, when we have a crash, as we have in our recent past, when people aren't buying things and they aren't making things, you can't have the entire funding system of our schools crash at the same time. Property taxes provide stability and predictability for our educational system that is important. How I would reduce property taxes is I would freeze them for anyone who had paid them for 35 years or more. That's how I would address the problem of our seniors who are terrified about this uncontrolled increase. The other thing I would do is I would sell the state store system, apply those proceeds to the pension. The reason your property taxes are going up is because we're using that money to satisfy this unpaid pension obligation. So we address the pension, we'll bring your property taxes down.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Ellsworth, and to all of you. We're going to take a quick break. More questions for the candidates when we come right back to the WGAL studios.